Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Another episode, as always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. Thank you guys so much for all the support, all the emails, all the messages, all the things that you've sent my way, the show's way. Truly do appreciate that. And before we get started, if my voice does sound a little bit different, I have been sick over the past week. I'm actually much better and definitely on the other side of it, but was going through a bit of a coughing fit and all that, nasty stuff that happens with sickness. So if I sound a little bit different, that's why, but hopefully won't show up too much here in this interview today. What we're going to do today is talk about offense. We're going to get into 4-out, 1-in offense specifically, which is, I know, something that is really popular. I know a lot of you guys who are listeners either run something out of 4-out, 1-in or have, specific 4-out, 1-in, read and react type principles or things that you like to do. So I really am happy to be able to get a conversation going on the 4-out, 1-in offense, talk about why it works for my guest, how to get players integrated in it at the university level to get them ready to run this offense successfully at that level, how to kind of practice it, refine it, and also make some modifications or adoptions or be able to kind of handle when defenses throw different looks at you and still get what you want offensively. So we'll cover all those aspects today, and I'm going to do that today, of course, with my guest, who is currently the head women's basketball coach at North Central University. Very happy to be joined today by Coach David Rohrbach today. Coach, again, really appreciate that we're able to carve out some time here to have a conversation today. How are things going?
It's going good. Really looking forward to being on and talking basketball, and appreciate the opportunity.
Coach, let's go ahead and start with your basketball journey, and let's talk about your coaching journey and talk us through where's this game of basketball taking you, where's this coaching journey taking you, and ultimately, how did you end up at North Central?
I would say my journey's been a little bit unique, but one I'm thankful for. I was a head high school boys varsity coach for 8 years and an athletic director. Took a team to 3 straight state tournaments, coached in a state championship game, and then had the opportunity to what I had at the time I thought was my dream job. Got promoted or got hired at one of the largest high schools in the state I was originally from in South Dakota, and honestly kind of thought I'd be there forever, but ended up honestly just resigning that position and then really wanting to get into college. Had an athletic director who I knew, which a lot of times, connections are kind of everything.
Yeah.
And just kind of, he had reached out to me before, but anyway, so I made that connection back with him and just was like, here's the situation. Like, is there anything available where you're at? At the time, there was an opening on the women's basketball staff here at North Central. So he put me in contact with the head women's basketball coach, which was Leah Zabla at the time. And she had an opening on staff. So anyways, long story short, ended up becoming the women's assistant last year. It was a really good fit. And sometimes you're just in the right place, right time. She ended up, I worked under her for a year. She ended up getting a Division II, the main assistant job in South Dakota, then at Augustana, where she currently is. And then I obviously applied for the job when she left, got promoted over the summer. So here we are now, obviously the head women's basketball coach here at North Central University. Love it. Honestly, no place I'd rather be. But kind of a unique journey, but one I wouldn't trade. So just, a lot of different kind of life experiences, but definitely really thankful to be where I'm at.
What was that transition like, moving one chair over, going from that assistant role to the head role? Was that a huge adjustment for you? Was it made a little bit easier by being already established in the program? What was that like, being able to, make that transition over?
I obviously just, being a head coach before, made that transition easier, but also definitely needed for sure a year in the college game, a year here. There's just so much you don't know about the college game when it comes to recruiting, different recruiting databases, just how things work day in, day out. So yes, that year was invaluable. That was huge, just super crucial for me. And then obviously, as everyone says, moving over one chair, your stress load increases a ton. And obviously, you're making a ton more decisions. But no,
Yeah.
just even just from like, you know, just the scouting software, just everything, that year was invaluable, and Leah was just an incredible help. Learned a lot from her as well. So yeah, it was really a beneficial year for me for sure.
That's awesome. Coach, I know that that word culture gets used a lot, and we talk about the dynamics of what a program looks like and how a program feels, and uh the just the vibes, I guess, that you get when
Mhm.
you're at a certain program. And I know that culture is kind of this whole catch-all term, but we all have our
Right.
different definitions of what that means. So before we get into our topic, I wanted to kind of talk about what your definition is of how the culture looks at North Central. How would you kind of define what it is? How would you describe it? And kind of talk about kind of how you're continuing to build it, as well as kind of add, your own, personal coaching philosophies into that culture at North Central.
Right. No, I think everybody would define culture as kind of, your habits, right? Like what you do, what you allow. And then I would even take it a step further and just saying like, I would even define culture as what's the atmosphere of your team, right? Like when you step
Hmm.
into the gym, what does it feel like? Are people working hard? What's the overall atmosphere of the team, the gym? Like, are people working hard? Are attitudes up? Is energy up? So that's kind of the way I would even take it a step further as far as culture goes. I think culture can be seen, but I also think it can be felt. And as far as kind of the culture here at North Central, um, I mean, I would say there's kind of an expectation for winning to some degree. 3 years ago, made the D3 national tournament under Coach Paul Broner. And then the year after, when Leah Zabla took over, made the conference championship game again for the second straight year, and then made the playoffs last year. Ended up losing in the first round, but still made the playoffs. So yeah, definitely a culture where there's an expectation to be good, to be excellent. But also I think even going beyond kind of winning, there's a culture of family. We hear that a lot. It's a smaller university because it
Yeah.
is a faith-based university. So there kind of is a family atmosphere on the campus, but also among the basketball team, which is something that we're really big on. I know our culture word is kind of together. We just believe we're better together, stronger together. So we're just, everything we do, we just want to be at practice, games, we just kind of want that togetherness feel, whether it's sharing the basketball, whether it's cheering for each other, celebrating each other. I just think that's really contagious. So that's kind of the culture we're looking to build upon, but also, even take even further and kind of take to the next level, if you will.
Yeah, and I think something that you mentioned, which I think is really key, especially at the university level, is you kind of know that you are it's a smaller school. You said that it was faith-based, so you kind of can go into your recruiting, kind of making sure that you're specifically targeting individuals who are going to, comfortably fit in and know what the culture is and know what the expectations are. There's probably a certain, almost maybe like a player profile that you can kind of look at and know if they're going to fit in well at North Central.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, and even just to some degree, right, to get admitted to our university, there are
Hmm.
steps that people have to, like I think there's like a paragraph or an essay people have to write to say, I agree with some of these statements, things like that. So yeah, there definitely is, that maybe makes it a little easier for us in the recruiting process. But yeah, and not that people don't have bad days still, but it's still just, and you still have to, preach culture every day. But yeah, no, it definitely makes it a little bit easier as far as maybe what we're able to, narrow in on as far as the recruiting process for sure.
Awesome. Coach, let's talk about the 4-out 1 in, and I wanna start with on the philosophical level of it. So, um, from just kind of a philosophical X's and O's standpoint, why does a 4-out 1 in type offense kind of work for you? What is it that you like about it? What is it you get out of it that you feel helps your program be successful?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think there's a couple main reasons. For one, I think, court spacing, right? I think there's a quote like, offense is spacing, right? So I think for one, it keeps the floor spaced. It gives our guards opportunities to drive, to create. Another reason why we have the 4-out 1 in and not 5-out though, we have a really good post player, all conference player. She actually had 24 points in our home opener, 17 rebounds. So how do we feature her while also, giving our guards room and space to be able to create? So 4-out 1 in just made a ton of sense for us. Yeah, and just kind of a modern offense to also yeah, just kind of create space for everybody, but also be able to feature a really good post player as well.
And with that, uh, I guess kind of as a follow-up question to that is, since you obviously you're at the university level, so you're recruiting players in. When you're recruiting players, do you feel that there is like any sort of player can kind of come in and just, be fit into the offense? Is there kind of a training period or even like a learning period of understanding the offense? Or do you find that players kind of come in with kind of an understanding of how to kind of operate within a 4-out 1-in framework?
I would say very much a learning period.
Hmm.
And we've even seen that because we actually have a really large freshman class, and it's you can really tell what they ran in high school.
Okay.
Even just from a defensive philosophical standpoint, offensively, because some of our offense is very new. Like we can tell if you ran dribble drive in high school, we can tell if you didn't set any screens really in high school. Yeah, and it's really easy to identify early on, which is fun because now we get to break it down and teach you. But very easy to tell if they really didn't run much of anything of what we're trying to teach, or if they did run a little bit of what we are trying to run now at the university level. Yep.
So you have players that come in now and they're at, various skill sets and various understandings of the offense and what it is that you want. So kind of walk us through what is the process of kind of getting these players who, again, they probably don't know each other and they're at various skill levels and various, offenses that they ran in high school. What's the process of kind of getting all these players in and getting them kind of acclimated and getting them ready to run this offense in such a short period of time before you actually start having to run it live?
Right. I would say early on we do a lot of small sided games, small sided teaching, some drills. So whether that's like 2-on-2, even just some like 2-on-0 type of stuff, like teaching here's the action we want on this side when this happens. Then simulating like even some 3-person actions. So like some 3-on-0 actions. So like when the ball goes to the corner, we want you cutting through, right? This person filling over. When the ball goes slot to slot, now we want you setting a down screen, and then also then walking through, then another drill is walking through the action of here's your reads on this down screen. If your defender's trailing you, we have a curl, we have a straight cut, we have a slip option. So just really breaking down those different actions, but there's a lot of actions to walk through. So like
Yeah.
breaking down, like one drill is breaking down here's the specific actions of just a down screen, and then another drill is breaking down, it might be a 3-person drill of breaking down what do we do when the ball goes to the corner. So yeah, just a lot of individual drills of breaking down the individual pieces of it when the ball is on a certain side. I would say then we do a lot of 5-on-0 to kind of piece it all together, and then yeah, and then eventually you're bringing them all together 5-on-5. It's amazing how early on how chaotic that looks. So then you got to get back to individual sides, 5-on-0, and then eventually it starts to look better and better with 5-on-5 settings. We do record our practices, so we're able to show the ladies on
Mhm.
film what we're looking for. Have some whiteboard sessions as well, which we found that actually helps bring clarity quite a bit. We do have some ladies come in for individual film sessions too. But yeah, all of that helps. Some are visual learners, some have to rep it. So just kind of using whatever methods we can to help instill that offense, because it's different than what they ran last year. And then obviously for most of our freshmen, it's completely new. So yeah, that's just a lot of different ways, small sided games, 2-on-2, 2-on-0, 3-on-3, 3-on-0, 5-on-0, and then ultimately bringing it into 5-on-5. So
And something really cool about, what it is that you said is like the time dedicated to, like you said, even if it's running, like 2-on-0 or even in 5-on-0 situations like that, to really make sure that they understand the movements and where everything goes. I think as coaches we can get, sometimes, and I think rightfully so, like, really concerned about like, oh, we got to make sure that they're playing right away and everything like that. We want to get them to a certain point, but if there's, as you mentioned, if there's certain actions that they need to understand about, how to read on certain things or cut based on certain things or certain actions, like to have them do it in a 2-on-0 situation and just work on the actual movement itself before there's a defender they have to worry about. they probably need that level of like understanding at that base level first before they can build up to that. And it seems like that's even true for you guys, even at the university level. They need that like base level of understanding at a 2-on-0 or a 3-on-0 or whatever the situation, 5-on-0 situation may be, and see what that looks like. And then they can kind of incorporate, okay, now that there's defense here, how can I incorporate all this that I learned?
Right. No, totally agree. And we've found that to be, sometimes it just clicks way easier. The game slows down for them if they can see, you almost break it down like, okay, on this side of the court, here's what you're doing. And then so like, yeah, if we can slow the game down for them, and then so it's not overwhelming, and then they see, okay, when I make this read or this play on this side of the court, and then, then I'm just cutting through or I'm filling over or I have a down screen on this read. And then, as they start to get used to that, then it makes more sense when we put it in like 5-on-0 or then 5-on-5. Yeah. So I think it's all about just trying to get the game to slow down for them. So then, then when we obviously are trying to play faster, because obviously when you throw defense at them, everything speeds up and it
Sure.
can almost just look really, really chaotic. But trying to slow it down for them, so they can make reads without overthinking.
In your experience, are there certain, and I know it'll be different for every player, but are there certain actions within your offense that take your players a little bit longer to grasp and understand? Are there things that maybe for coaches listening who want to, run some sort of a 4-out 1-in, are there certain things that you found that players maybe just need a little bit more reps, or things take a little bit longer for it to click for them?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the big ones is just, how do you read that screen, right? Like how do you read your defender? How do you read that screen? When do you curl? When do you straight cut off it? When do you slip? Even when do you flare off that? I think reading that defender and slowing down enough to allow to read the defense to get into your defender. One thing that we saw a lot is just our offense wanted to rush that where we weren't even, hardly making contact with our defender and then not even rubbing shoulders with the screener. So just, slowing down enough so then you can do the action at the speed you need to. So slowing down to then play fast. So that was
Mm.
something we really had to hammer pretty hard early on as well.
Yeah, that's a really cool point, because you mentioned, I think you even said that some of your players like maybe didn't have a lot of screen action happening in high school, for them to be seeing screens and having to read off screens when they maybe didn't see a lot or have to do a lot of it themselves is maybe something that's completely foreign to them.
Right. No, 100%. Because and actually, what we would see is, a lot of our newcomers would just almost get the sense like they just had to move, and as long as they were moving, that was what we wanted. When in actuality, we're trying to get you to do, um, you know, a couple of movements that we're looking for, right? So it was almost like false movement, right? So instead of just cutting through or maybe exchanging with someone, we need that down screen so you can free up a teammate to get open for a shot. So some of it was just they're trying to do right, but it's just that it just wasn't clicking yet. So yeah, just a matter of reading the court, understanding what we want, and then as they understand what we're looking for. And again, that's why we do those small sided games. Here's the actions we're looking for when the ball goes here, things like that. And then, yeah, it slows down the more they do it. There's just no replacement for reps, as well. And,
Sure.
and the longer you're in an offense, the slower it gets for them, for you mentally. And then, yeah, it just gets easier and easier.
You and with that, as kind of a follow-up of that, you mentioned how important it is a couple of times about being able to make reads, being able to make decisions, and just the idea of decision making itself. Is that something that you think can be really worked on and taught on in practice? Is that something that needs to just have a lot of reps to it in more live situations to figure out? How do you kind of work with your players on that, that more mental side of being able to read and make decisions off of that, and just kind of the whole process of decision making in an offense in general? How do you feel that the best way there is to kind of go about getting your players strengthening on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think there's a few different ways. Again, I think that's where some drills come in handy, where you
Hmm.
implement a defense, like if we're trying to get some of our ladies to read a defender, like we may do a three-sided game where, we have a passer and then, a down screener and a person reading the screen, and we got defenders guarding them where we're live. So defense is getting reps, but also offense is learning how to read them. What is the defense giving you, and then read off of that. So I think that's one way. And then I'll be honest, once our ladies kind of have a pretty good grasp of the offense and the movements we're looking for, we do a lot of 5-on-5, a lot of 4-on-4, a lot of 5-on-5, just because we purely believe that that's ultimately the most game-like, and then we'll stop it often. Like we'll show them in the moment what we're looking for, what they could have done there. We might tell them in the moment as well what they did really well, so they get that positive feedback, reinforcement, and so others can see what it was that was done the right way. We'll also stop it and show them what they could have done better. So we just really believe that ultimately, when the offense is grasped enough where we can do 5-on-5, we really rep a lot of like half court 5-on-5 setting as well.
You mentioned that you have a pretty talented pretty talented post player. Talk about where you look to get her, really involved. Where, especially somebody as talented as you said that she is, where is her role in the offense? What are your expectations for her? How does she kind of open up everything on offense for you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. In our offense, so we're trying to get an early steal for her if we can. So we keep her on the strong side of the floor, in transition. If we have a steal, we're going to try to get her a touch right away. And then if we swing the basketball, so we do play through our trail a lot, whether it's through just passing to the trail, a drag screen, and then we'll have her rotate with the ball. Something we do as well to try to get her touches. Also, like we'll set a drag screen and then kick the ball back to our trail after they set that drag screen. So we're obviously playing through our trail, our 4. And then we love to look high low there, and then have her have our post up right in the middle of the floor off that and looking high low. The reason we do that is we just feel that it's a lot harder for them to send a double when she's posting up right in the middle of the floor, especially early on in transition there. And we've had quite a bit of success with that, at least game 1. And then it's easier for our shooters then to get a kick out 3 if they do send that double right there in the middle of the floor as well. So that's the way we try to isolate her as well. I would say a change from dribble drive as well, as much as possible, we're trying to kind of rotate her with the basketball, and then we'll duck her under when she sees someone driving at her as well. So just really trying to make an emphasis of getting her touches. And then to kind of keep some spacing when she gets touches, we're that opposite slot, we're trying to drive and then lift opposite corner as well, just to create some movement, keep people honest as well if they do bring a double.
So out of curiosity, when you have a player like that who's doing a lot of operating out in the post and in the block, and you have these other players that you kind of talked about earlier who, they're getting into the system and they're figuring things out. How do you kind of work through your practices and training where you're kind of making sure that both of them are getting relevant work? Are you having post players kind of work on one end, working on various things, while maybe some other players are working on other levels? How do your kind of practice plans work where you're making sure that your players are getting the work that they need, and then are you afterwards kind of just bringing them together? I'm just kind of curious how you kind of separate what's happening with the posts versus what's happening with the other 4.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say at least a couple times a week we split up guards and posts. And so we'll have an assistant or 2 working with our guards, and then another assistant or myself working with the posts, and we'll kind of alternate during the week. But so we'll rep with the posts, kind of some of the action we're looking for, whether it's just some skill work for them, and then some of the movements we're looking for, and then like one day maybe just the ball screen action we're looking for and how they can read that, and then the movements we're looking for off of the guard action. And then with the guards, very much a lot of the actions with the guards we're looking for outside of just sometimes just getting shots up and skill work. A lot of it is skill work within the design concepts we want. So like lifting at the right times, making that extra pass, cutting through when we make that pass to the corner, and then just kind of the relocation, sometimes the exchanges that we're looking for as well. So we try to make sure that when we're getting shots up with our guards, that it's the movement that we really want as well within our offense. So it's not just getting shots up, but also kind of repping those down screens, and the movements that we want as well. So yeah, does that kind of does that make
No,
sense?
yeah. And that's a real important part though that I'm glad that you mentioned. That's kind of why I wanted to bring it up is that you're within your offense, there's two separate skill sets that are happening, skill sets that need to kind of come together for the offense to work. And so, as I'm glad that you mentioned, you will spend some time, you said a few times a week, deliberately making sure that there's, specific targeted work on different areas because, the needs of obviously your posts and guards are completely different. And so they need to have a bit of that, isolated skill work, and then they can, better come together afterwards and kind of put what they have and worked on, put it together.
Right. No, 100%. And it is very different.
Hmm.
And yeah, it is, especially, in a 4-out 1-in, and we really do try as much as possible to have, like, allow our post to be back to the basket, but we also bring we'll set a lot of ball screens in our four
Yeah.
out 1-in, and we kind of do it almost like in a Villanova type of way, where as that basketball moves sometimes from slot, from the wing to the slot or slot to slot, we'll bring our post up and set a slot ball screen, and then we're lifting that corner. So whether we have a shot, or whether we just have a straight pass right to the post, or a guard can get to the rim, or we have a roll and a rise where we're kicking it back and now looking into our post, that's one way we'll try to free up our post as well. That's one way we love to create some movement, so it's not just our post just getting hammered on all the time trying to seal. That's one way we'll bring her out, make her defender stay honest as well, and also try to free her up as well.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this. So I want to make sure I specifically ask this question because, again, as you mentioned, how important screening is to your offense. What needs to happen for a good screen to be set? What are the principles that you teach your girls about setting an effective screen?
Yeah, and I think for one, it's kind of where we want that set.
Hmm.
And so we want it set wide enough so we can make that read, so we can either curl, because sometimes you set it too low, there's not room to curl or slip it, right? Because that pass will never be there. So high enough so that you can actually have a chance to hit that person on a slip or a curl. But then obviously low enough so that you can come off it and be ready to shoot it. So I think kind of where it's at is important for us as well. I mean, and then, like anyone would say, making contact, and then diagnosing, is the defense, are they switching? Because like if they're switching, okay, now we need to kind of walk in, and you're probably going to need to actually screen your defender if they're switching those screens. So that's a unique part of it as well. But just making contact, and then it's both the people working together to
Hmm.
essentially meet there, and because otherwise you're not going to have an option of either coming off it straight, slipping it, or curling it. So really working with both the person setting the screen and the person using the screen, to really make an effort to meet in the right spot.
And as I'm sure you could attest to it, this is not something that's going to be perfected or done well, day one or day two. I'm sure it's an ongoing process to get it right.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah. And it's, I mean, and it's almost something that, like, we'll do it right, in a drill. We'll do it really well in a drill. And then we
Yeah.
go 5-on-5, and it's like, did we not just work on this?
Yeah, yeah,
Did it
yeah.
not just look decent? But no, it's amazing how you can get so sped up, 5-on-5. And then you get even more sped up when you start going full court 5-on-5. So it just has to be something that's repped constantly. Yep.
So speaking of which, I wanted to ask about your kind of plan in terms of your practice planning and how you kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'm kind of curious about how you kind of use uh, preseason, season, and beyond. And I know you're right in the middle of the season right now here, but how do you kind of imagine continually working on your offense throughout the season in your practices? What do you kind of see as like kind of your plan for continuing to kind of adapt and make changes and tweaks and refinements to try and get your offense just a little bit better week in and week out throughout the season?
Yeah, I love it. There's definitely some basics that, we'll do that, almost like your daily vitamins, right? There's some stuff that we'll do
Mhm.
that are just kind of just staples for us, that are just we just have to do to continue to get better. So I think just your basic, constantly reading the screens, and just the typical actions that we want as the base of our offense. So those will continue to stay. But then, as we continue to progress to get better at the offense, and then trying to, how do we read the defenses and understand what they're trying to do to take different things away? So, like, so some teams, they might hedge ball screens, they might jam the ball screens, they might switch. What are some reads we can do out of that? So, maybe we ghost it, maybe we leave early, we slip it. What are just some different things we can do on
Mm-hmm.
those ball screens we talked about? What do we do if they're switching our away screens? What do we do? If they're just playing it regular, so there's so many different defenses we'll see, obviously. So I think just the biggest thing is we got to have that base, and then once we get good at the base, then now our adjustments will make way more sense to our ladies. So yeah, you have your staples, you have the things you try to do on a weekly basis, to some degree, almost a daily basis, and then yeah, then those adjustments make a lot more sense once teams start scouting, and different teams have different principles that they believe in as well, that we got to be able to handle too.
So you kind of are making um kind of adjustments or kind of walkthroughs or kind of talking about things based on who it is that you're kind of seeing upcoming. Is that kind of right?
Yep, for sure, for sure.
So now I'm curious also, as it kind of was kind of bubbling in my head also, and it's a little bit of a change in direction and question, but I was kind of thinking of, in season stuff, and I know you guys just talked about how you just had a game recently. How much charting are you doing of stats and info and looking at things like offensive, efficiency type stats? And I guess in essence, what my question is how do you kind of know that your offense is getting the type of shots that you want and things are kind of operating the way that you want? What sort of things are you looking at the end at a kind of a stat sheet?
Yeah, I mean, obviously percentages help with that for sure. And then, I mean, and contrary to some of the analytical things, we'll definitely watch film, and my eye test will tell me too. Is the ball moving? Is the ball moving like we want it to? And I think also, though, I think our 3-point percentage, wasn't where it needs to be last game. So I think we were like, I want to say 3 of 18, right? So not a great percentage. So how do we also, like our post player played really well. How do we, get some scoring outside of there? So I think, we obviously need to generate more open looks than we did. So I think that part of that is
Mm-hmm.
when I watch the film, like we didn't make much contact on our screens. And so
Mm.
that's a huge part of it. Also, we're a little bit late on our ball movement. So someone's open, and we're late with that pass, or we didn't see them. So just continuing to understand, like, our ladies getting better at playing with each other, but also seeing the game a little bit quicker, and then also making contact on those screens, because we're still that's still a work in progress. It really
Yeah,
is, and just
yeah.
understanding
So
that that's going to get each other open. It's going to help us to shoot a higher percentage as well, because we're shooting difficult shots, which is why our percentage was low as well, if that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, and you talked about how a lot of these things, right? You just talked about screening before, how it's such an ongoing process, and that, hopefully, right, the way that they look at the beginning of the season is gonna be a lot different than they work at the end of the season. But you also kind of mentioned about the emphasis on film, and you talk about film practices, obviously filming games and stuff like that. It seems that there is an expectation and for your players to really make sure that they're learning and applying what they're learning from film sessions, that your film sessions that you have of your players are really crucial for them to make leaps and gains and make improvements on your offense. I'm assuming all aspects, but offense as well.
Right. No, 100%. And yeah, and that's just a huge part of the game, is just that constant improvement. And we talk about that a lot, is especially early on in the season, because obviously this offense is brand new with our ladies. And that's something that we've really been telling them is, it's getting better, but we're excited to see where it's going to be in a month from now. And as we get into conference play, later on, because right now it's all non-conference play, is just, have the mindset that as you guys get more comfortable playing in this, and as it continues to get better and better and better, it's exciting to see, because like it's head and shoulders better right now than where it was in preseason,
Mm,
and where will it be in a month from now? So we've just been really trying to emphasize that, because I mean, you have practices where it's like, gosh, that was a struggle. It felt like you're trudging through mud, right? But
yeah.
at the end of the day, a week later after that practice, like it looks totally better. It looks way different than it did, the week before. So it's just a matter of those days are going to happen, but just to keep going, keep pressing, and keep believing in it. So yeah, and obviously you got to see some success in it, which is beneficial for them. But no, it just I think they believe in it. I think definitely have had enough success in it as well, where they understand that the more that they play with each other for one, and the more that they get used to it, I think they're excited to see where they're going to be, and where the team can be. Just in a month from now, at the end of the season, when it really matters as well.
Yeah, and I completely agree because you're in a situation too where you're bringing in, players who are in many cases, right? Like you mentioned, kind of unfamiliar with that system. They're unfamiliar with each other. There's so much unfamiliarity and just the newness of being at the university level as it is. There's so many things that they're getting adjusted to and they're getting used to that you have to, I think, as a coach, right? You have to have a certain level of understanding, a certain level of patience with it, and understand that there's no way that it could be perfect. There's going to be a lot of mistakes that happen, but it seems like for you, like you kind of or definitely like understand that that messiness is just part of what's going to happen at the beginning, but you can kind of look at the things that are going well and say like, well, we have all this that we can build off of. So I know that we're going to be well where we need to be at the middle at the end of the season because we have all these other pieces working, even if it isn't necessarily the best executed or doesn't look 100% great all the time at the beginning.
Right. No, and that's a great point. Yep. And you have to remind yourself that, because I remember like early on, it's easy to be like, oh gosh, we're behind in this area. And
Hmm.
you're like, we're not close to being ready for a game. And thank goodness for, you have preseason practices, right, to work out some of that. But no, it's, and yeah, and there's some stuff early on that you have to make sure that you know like the main points that you have to have, before those first couple games, right?
Hmm.
Like what are the movements that we have to have down, and then understand, like, because they're not going to probably do everything well, but what are the like the 3-4 things that we have to have down for like our first few games, and then what are the areas that we can continue to get better on as the year goes. So that's kind of how I would say I set up my practices, and also how I approached, like, what are the points I am going to hammer early on
Hmm.
in practice, and then give a little bit more grace to, as far as like, I'm going to teach this, just keep re-emphasizing this, and understand this might take a little bit more, but it's going to be a positive in the long run, because as they get it, there's room for growth, and then it'll be exciting that they'll keep improving, and they'll be able to see that improvement as the year goes as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, Coach. So I'll cycle back to the question specifically though about um, what are other defenses like to throw at you? What sort of defenses are you seeing? What sort of different looks do you get, and what sort of adoptions or modifications or little tweaks or things do you need to kind of put into your offense or emphasize to your girls based on the types of defenses that you're going to have thrown against you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first game, we saw a lot of blitz coverage on ball screens. So, we still ran a lot of ball screen, but one of the things we did with that is, we basically kicked it right back to the person who set the ball screen. And then we also looked high low off of that. So that worked pretty well for us, with that person blitzing. Obviously, another thing you can do is the person, setting that ball screen, if their defender is going to blitz it. You slip them early, they leave early, or you can obviously ghost them for a shot if they're a shooter. We do see typically, though, especially in our conference, we'll see a lot of
Mm,
drop coverage with the posts. So we will, we'll love to run a guard, and make it like we want them getting downhill, trying to attack that, whether it's for a mid-range jumper. Put that post in a predicament, like, let's see what they decide, and then again, like we talked about, we're gonna lift that strong side corner as well. So we'll also, because we want that other person to have to help a little bit as well. So we'll either hopefully have a shot on that side, or we'll lift, kick back, and then maybe have a dump down to our post as well. So all about trying to make two people decide, and then obviously hopefully we have one person open off of that. So the biggest thing we see is probably. You'll see a change in ball screen coverage, which you see that change at every level, whether it's college, high school. And then, yeah, we've seen, we had a scrimmage, they were switching every away screen. So we had to, unfortunately we hadn't had enough time to really rep what do we do when they're
Yeah.
switching it. But no, so that's kind of more on the fly. Okay, now you have to screen your person, right? When they're switching that, or in different, there's some different things you can do as far as when to cut off of that. But no, those are some of the kind of vanilla things we'll see there. As well, obviously your typical zone, then then that's a totally different story. But most people will switch dribble handoffs. But those are just some of the adjustments that we'll have to make as well.
Are you seeing a lot of different type of zone looks that teams throw at you, or is that or not really? I'm just curious the level of zone
Yeah.
that you're seeing at that level.
We see mostly man. There's one of the better teams in our conference. We'll throw a 2-3 zone and a 1-3-1. That they play almost exclusively zone. They won the conference last year, so we'll have to prepare for that. But no, typically we see it's heavy man-to-man defense. Yep.
Hmm.
Yep.
And there's probably I imagine there's defenses or people or game planning who are kind of zeroing in on your post player, kind of knowing that that's somebody in particular they got to watch out for. And so based on that, I imagine that may open up some new things based on the way that you see that the way that she's being handled, the way that she's being covered, to kind of potentially can open up some things for your guards and some things that have happened that way. I imagine that your post player potentially getting that much attention can kind of really change the dynamic and really open up the floor a little bit.
Right. No, that's a great point. And that's honestly something that we've been preparing for, kind of
Yeah.
trying to prepare her for, is, expect a double team. So, we've been working with even just, her getting her shot off even a little bit quicker, just because, in anticipation for a double team. We've also been working on kick out drills. So like, lifting the opposite side, her kicking out for threes. Cause we, depending on where those double teams come from, typically it's coming from that weak side block a lot of times. So working on that kick out there, because someone's going to be open over there, especially if we lift. Obviously, even just preseason, just in preparation for that, we're trying to dive and lift somebody. So we have a couple options, so we can, either make, either have a layup, but if they cover that, then we have someone lifting for a shot. So we've been repping that, where, we're getting her reps at passing to the drop off or passing to the lifter. So just, hopefully getting some reps there in preparation for her getting doubled, because there's just no way she won't see a double team throughout this season, especially as we get into conference play, because they already know about her. And then her getting off to a hot start will only increase that. Luckily, we have some shooters.
Yeah.
We another have a senior grad transfer who also played in the conference, transfer over. She's a really good shooter, has scored over 1,000 points in her career, so she'll definitely help as well. Got some other ladies that can knock down shots. So I think that will help. And just, we're definitely, one nice thing is kind of in that 4-out-1 offense, it does keep the floor space, and you can kind of identify where that double team's coming from as well. We're going to continue to empower our ladies to shoot. I'm just a firm believer that, as long as we're, it's the shot within our offense, and as long as your feet are set and you're open, and assuming that you're a person that we've identified that you can shoot, and our ladies know if they're 3-point shooters or not. We're gonna believe in you. We're gonna empower you to shoot, and it's just gonna, as we get going down the stretch, it's gonna help our post player. It's just gonna help us, as we go. So, yeah.
Well, as a follow-up to that, Coach, out of curiosity, and as you kind of mentioned, right, the floor spacing, one of the great things coming out of a 4-out-1 in, and as you mentioned, need shooters. What's the difference between a shooter who successful in high school and is able to, make their way up to the collegiate level versus actually being successful shooter at the collegiate level? What are the differences, and what are the things that you got to work on with your girls to make sure that they can translate being maybe good in high school as a shooter versus no, this is what it takes to be good as a shooter at the university level?
Yeah, a great question. I mean, I think of course it's reps, right? I mean, it's really tough to be a good shooter, a consistent shooter, if you don't put time in on your own. And you see across the board, like your best shooters put time in, outside of practice. So that's a big one. But also, I think just that game speed. I mean, there's just I don't, care
Yeah,
typically
can't
where
replicate
you're.
that.
Right. Just kind of where you're coming from. Typically the college game speed is just faster. It just is. And so, just being able to, get your feet set quicker. And then, just the game slowing down for you. I know I've talked about that a lot, but there just really is that adjustment that you see. And so I think that's the biggest thing. Some adjust really quickly. Some, it takes a year or two. But ultimately, I think that's probably the biggest factor for sure.
Couple more questions, Coach, before we hit our concluding segment that I kind of wrote down here as you were talking. With an offense that is heavily decision based and a lot of reading and looking at what the defense is giving you and making smart decisions off of that. As a coach in a game, how do you balance letting your players try and, figure things out on their own if they're kind of struggling and being able to kind of persevere and kind of get a breakthrough versus needing to kind of come have them come back together, call a timeout, maybe not necessarily draw something up, but sort of kind of get them back on track. How do you kind of balance that sort of I'm going to let them play and I'm going to let them work through it versus all right, we got to come back together and we got to figure out something here. What is that like for you as a coach?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that's a question that I've tried to work through so much in my own right. And kind of what the conclusion I've come to is I just think you always kind of have to have a set or a play ready to go. And know like essentially where you want the ball to go to. Because and that just comes down to kind of knowing your team and getting a feel for the game as well. Because I think there's sometimes it's really good to um not over control the game, right? And let them flow. Obviously if you're, trying to play faster, let the game flow a little bit and you can tell, the game's coming easy to them. I think there's other times like we got to get a score here or we have to at least get a good look. And I think that's a great time to run a set, run a play and get the ball where you want it or get it in the hands of who you want it, or at least get like maybe you get like your two best players, playing on one side or kind of a two-man game, if you will. So I think it's just all about kind of knowing your personnel, your players, where you want the ball to go, and also kind of just having a feel for where the game's at. So I would say, yeah, just kind of a combination of both. Like I love to, um, not be a control freak, but also I think at the same time, there's just times where bringing control to chaos at times you just have to have definitely some solid sets to go to just settle everyone down, get a great look, and then that for one it builds confidence, and now your players are right back to kind of back to being confident again, and then they can see the game clear again. So yeah, a little bit of both, but I think it's all about on your players, your personnel, and where you're at in the game for sure.
So without spoiling the whole sets, when you have to drop a set, when you have to drop some sort of action, what is it typically that you're looking to get? Is it you're trying to trying to get an easy shot up, or are you trying to just get some space going? What is it that you're like, all
Mhm.
right, this is in general, I'm gonna call it this set because we're just gonna work on or emphasize getting, X on this
Right.
particular set. What does that kind of look like when you're thinking of drawing a quick set?
Right. No, that's a great question. I would say there's three things I go to. So if I'm going to get a
Okay.
play for my post player, I'm going to get her. It's going to be very specific of everything where we're going. So it's not going to be like we have three different options. It's the ball's going here, and this is where we're trying to get her the basketball. And then typically with my guards, I'm like, it might be some sort of like zoom action, a handoff action, and then let them either give them some space so they can either like pull up for a jumper, read it, get to the rim, things like that. So love to give my guards options. And then the third one I would say is just kind of in a feel of the game. If I need a three, then it'll be a specific like here's where my guard's coming off of this, hit a hitter there. I will typically with a 3-point play have one other wrinkle off that just because at times the defense might switch it, they might get through that screen and now we don't have it, and then I just
Yeah,
need them to have
you can get
whether
something
it's
else.
flow. Exactly. Whether it's flow into a ball screen or have, a post who maybe set that screen for him, just, flip around and seal. That might be the wrinkle to it. But yeah, those are kind of my three mainstays.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you're able to kind of walk us through it because I think that you know, it's such an interesting, dynamic that we kind of faces as coaches. I talk to a lot of coaches, obviously, and there's a lot of talk in the basketball community about, letting your players play and, not necessarily, restricting them or making them robots or, just, having to be automated to certain actions. And
Right.
I totally get that, letting them play, letting them have, learn the game and experience the game. And at the same time, there's, like how much can you let them get away with making, certain mistakes or just letting things, get, sloppy and out of control before you have to kind of like rein them in. And I don't even think for me personally as a coach, I'm necessarily like great at that because I really feel like I, maybe sometimes I'm a little bit too quick to want to, just draw something up right away and not let them figure something out. But I think as coaches, it's something that we all just kind of have to contemplate and think about and kind of consider. And, what is it that looks good, and are they doing well? And maybe they're just not executing, or the shots aren't falling, versus like, whoa, like this is something completely like out of control and we got to rein it in. It's not easy.
Right. No, and I mean, exactly everything you just said is like, I mean, that's almost what keeps you up at night, right? It's like that's the $1 million question. And then trying to, come up with the ideal thing to go to. What do you go to when, you're struggling to score? What's the perfect set to get into, if you will? Not that there's ever a perfect set, but what's the perfect spacing on the court to get to? Who needs the basketball and where? And then so much can be a variable based on how the defense is playing, right? Like, is a handoff great when the defense is switching everything? Is a ball screen great when they're blitzing it? So there's just so many variables of,
Mm,
what to get into, but also, then I think the biggest thing is just trying to, get their confidence back ultimately, so then they can, feel good, but then also, flow a little bit in regard whatever it is. So no, I love it. That's exactly, I think it's just constantly thinking through, giving them a little bit of autonomy and freedom, but also making sure that you get them back on track for sure.
yeah, or be in a situation like I've been where things are out of control and they don't look great, and call up a set, and then that set doesn't that's
Right.
that set
Right. Yep.
doesn't work out either, and that's like, oh well,
Yep.
all
No
right,
doubt.
well, here we go, sort of thing. I've been there before too.
Yeah.
It's funny. Um,
Yep.
couple more questions, Coach. We'll hit our concluding segment. What advice would you give to a coach putting in a 4-out, 1 in for the first time? If you were to kind of go back and do it again, what would you do with all the knowledge you have of it now? What would you do if you were kind of going back and implementing it for the first time?
Yeah, well, just something that comes to my mind right away is don't be afraid to deviate from something that you may have like really wanted to do early on, but that you found out through some reps early that isn't going to work for your team. And like for an example,
Mm-hmm.
um one of our early entries right away was going to be double screens, and then we found out that it was taking way too long to set up for double screens, so we scrapped it after about like, after like 3 or 4 preseason practices. So then we just went away from double screens as one of our entries and went to something different. So like our core concept stayed the same, but we went away from double screens as one of our entries because, again, just for us it was taking way too long to get into it, and there was just we just felt like it was just causing more confusion and just clogging things up. So now some people love double screens. I've used double screens in the past. It works great for some, but for us it just wasn't going to be beneficial. So I think being willing to deviate a little bit, at the same time, and then, ultimately it's just about doing what's best for your team for sure. I think that would be the biggest thing.
Yeah, and the double screen part. I'm actually just kind of picturing that in my head, you said it just took too long. It just wasn't coming together quickly.
Yep, 100%. Yep, just taking too long, and then yeah, and just trying to, because once you're there, and then you were trying to get secondary action out of those double screens and then fill people over, and it
Mm-hmm.
just took too long, and so we simplified it, and honestly, our offense was clicking way better after we took it out. So
Well, isn't that also part of, just coaching is in general, is sometimes we learn all these things, or we have all these actions, and we want to have, this action secondary, tertiary, and we have all these like different wrinkles and looks out of it, and maybe it looks good conceptually, but there's just way too much going on, or it's just way too complicated, and our players just like don't need all that.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. It's amazing how just sometimes it almost sometimes what seems so simple is actually like, is just sometimes better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last question, Coach, and I'll hit our concluding segment from there, which is, um, what are I'm always curious about this, especially when it comes to working, practice situations, and you're working on, your offense, I'm sure working on your defense as well. What are your kind of like parameters when you're in practice doing, 5-on-5 work? Are there ways that you kind of make it competitive? Are there ways that you kind of focus, or have players have limitations or restrictions and work on certain things when you're kind of doing that sort of, 3-on-3, 5-on-5 sort of work? Um, what does that kind of look like, and how do you make sure that you really get something out of it at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a few different ways. I mean, I know in the past, like, given like in 5-on-5 settings, one thing we did is like, the offense could only move when they had the basketball, right? So that's, it's forcing you to try to get a shot for somebody else. Obviously, working on defensive gap principles there too, but just some different restrictions. We definitely, to make it competitive, we'll keep score a lot of times. And we have the benefit of a larger roster, so we'll have like 3 teams of 5, so we can really get after it as far as keeping score and different things like that. Different restrictions, like when we do some small sided games, like we'll put a couple cones out there and to give the offense an advantage as far as then like decision making. Like, so as soon as the offense moves, like defense has to touch the cone, then the offense is so hopefully getting downhill, right? Beating that defender. And then obviously defense is trying to get back in front, but just some quick decision making. So then our offense is hopefully getting in the lane, and then whether it's making a drop pass to the post, a kick up for a 3, but we're also putting the defense at a disadvantage. So working on defense, but also working on our decision making for offense. So just some different things we'll do there. But yeah, I think keeping score is one of the biggest things. I know our ladies really like that competition there.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, I mean, we'll just kind of rotate in defense and offense, and we'll go up and down. When we go up and down, we like to do it in a much more controlled setting. Like, we call it ODO. So we'll go offense, offense, and then, bring in a whole new group. And like to have a coach with each team. So they're just getting feedback constantly when they're on the baseline. So those are just some things that we found to be helpful.
Very cool. No, I was always curious about the way that coaches like to run those, and like you said, right? Players love to be competitive, so any chance they
Yeah.
have to get out there and do that sort of thing, I'm sure they relish in that sort of role.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yep.
To wrap up, Coach, a couple questions I ask every guest, starting with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing it, our listeners would be able to learn from?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is just be yourself, right? I think in coaching, it's easy to look at others' coaching journey or look at others and just I think so often it's easy to think that like, wow, their coaching journey was easy, or they're just the game comes easy for them. But I think a lot of times, I don't think coaching is easy for anybody, really.
Hmm.
I think everyone's still in a learning process, and I think every season is different for every single coach, because you're constantly you just deal with stuff every single year, because I mean, you're dealing with people, and ultimately it's about people. You're trying to get the best out of people and for them. So I think ultimately, don't be surprised when you go through challenges. I think if every coach was honest, they're walking through very similar challenges as well. So just, not getting discouraged through the process. And then, yeah, ultimately, I mean, it's just past success doesn't mean, you're going to be successful in the future either, because it's competitive. So it's tough to win, celebrate wins as well. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
thought. So,
Yeah, I mean, no two games are the same, right? No two
right.
seasons are the same. Is it rosters changing all the time? Look, alignments, divisions changing regions every time. Like nothing is past success does not guarantee anything in the future. But I think what you bring up though is a really good point of, allow yourself to enjoy, some of the successes that you have, some of the wins that you have, because it's really easy to, go, next thing forward, I just move on, next thing forward, next thing forward, next thing forward. But I don't know. I think if you just do that all the time, you just kind of miss out on a lot of the enjoyable parts of coaching. And I don't know, to me, what's the fun in that?
Right. No, and I mean, you end up looking back and, and it's like you realize, like, yeah, it's during that time you were stressed and just maybe thinking also about, oh, I got to get to the next job or I have to win, and, to move on. And you kind of miss the joy of the journey. And, that really is ultimately, like, like in 10 years, you're going to look back and be like, dang, that was the prime of my life. So yeah,
Yeah.
just kind of enjoying that, like you said, for sure.
Coach, to wrap up, I give kind of every guest kind of what I call this 60-second soapbox. We can go over 60 seconds. I'm not going to time you. I just like to put a catchy title to things, but I like to use it kind of as your platform to kind of get out like a final thought, a final message, kind of a final idea, something that you want to leave the listeners with that you can kind of take, really any direction you want, basketball wise, coaching, otherwise. It's your soapbox after all. So, Coach, I'm just going to kind of open up the floor here for you and let you take it from here.
Appreciate it. No, I guess the only thing I have is obviously just love coaching. I think the reason I got into it was just to believe in people, believe in them, empower them. I think if I had a soapbox, it's just I think ultimately, you just at times, there's so many good coaches. At times you see people just, give up on kids pretty early, who actually could be really good. And all they're just looking for someone to believe in them. So that's kind of my biggest thing, more my soapbox for myself than anything, is just to empower athletes, believe in them. And I think, it's amazing what players are capable of when you believe in them. And I think, allowing them to work through mistakes. I think it's such a fine line between, not allowing players to, make too many mistakes, but also, believing in them through them, empowering them, and believing in them, because ultimately there's a lot more in them than I think they even realize. And ultimately, as long as they're doing the little things, there's so much more in them. So that would be my biggest thing.
Awesome.
I think sometimes people just give up on kids too early, and ultimately they're just there's a lot more in them. So that's my biggest thing.
Fantastic. Appreciate that, Coach. I think that's a great message. Great message to end on. Coach, really appreciate you coming on here talking about a lot of different things about, ranging from culture, talking about your offense, your practices, game planning, filming, talking about in-game stuff, a lot of stuff 4-out, 1-in related, offense related, and a lot in between. So I know things are kicking off here for you. Hopefully things continue to go really well. I know it got a really exciting season that you're going through right now. So hopefully things continue to be going well. Hopefully it's a great season, and best of luck going forward, Coach. Really appreciate you coming on here and being able to talk to us.
Yeah, it was great. Appreciate having me on. Yeah, it was awesome. And yeah, thanks again.
Appreciate all of you for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.